Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind the world of boring bills and awkward family group chats to dive into something far more chaotic. The dark, dreamy, utterly bonkers underbelly of 1920s Paris. This is not the Paris you see on calendars. No baguettes, no accordion players, and not a single Eiffel Tower souvenir in sight. Tonight, we're crawling through the smoke-filled jazz clubs, the back alley pharmacies, and the velvet-draped bedrooms where writers, painters, and lost souls chase the most dangerous muse of all, heroin. And since this is our brand new channel, before you settle in, maybe take a second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what you find here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Alright, now's the time to dim those lights. Maybe point a fan at your face for a little white noise, and try to get comfortable, because things are about to get weird, and possibly a little sticky. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would actually feel like to be part of Paris's lost generation? Did Hemingway really drink that much? Or was he just trying to numb the pain of listening to jazz played on an out-of-tune trumpet? Was every artist high? Or just the ones who thought urinals belonged in art galleries? How do you buy heroin when your French is limited to croissants? Did the flappers really have it all? Or did they just have excellent pharmacists? And if you had to survive as a washed-up poet in a freezing Parisian garret, would you last a week? Or would you end up selling your shoes for a spoon and a little peace and quiet? Congratulations. You've just woken up in Paris, 1926. Your wallet is empty, your coat smells like absinthe and cigarette butts, and you have a mysterious appointment in a jazz club that may or may not be a front for the city's busiest opium den. Good luck. The first thing you notice isn't the sunlight streaming through elegant French windows. It's the sticky, sour smell of yesterday's gin and an overwhelming sense of existential regret. Your mattress is just a pile of rags on the floor, and the only thing softer than your pillow is your resolve not to use it today. The walls around you are less quaint Parisian and more avant-garde mold experiment. You can almost feel the cold stone breathing at you. Every draft sneaking in through the cracked window is a reminder that, once again, you fell asleep without remembering to plug the gap with your only clean sock. The good news? No one can see you like this. The bad news? There's a suspicious rustling from behind the cupboard, and if it's the mouse again, he's probably here to repossess your last piece of stale bread. You try to stretch, but the ceiling is low enough that you bang your elbow on a beam older than the concept of personal boundaries. The entire room tilts just a little, and for a moment, you wonder if you're hungover, or if the whole building is just permanently tipsy. You're in a garret, an attic room made for poets, painters, and people who cannot afford more than one pair of pants. The view? Well, if you squint, you can see the top of a chimney and the ghostly outline of Montmartre through a streaky pane of glass that last saw a cleaning rag during the last war. There's a mug on the floor. At least, you think it's a mug. In the uncertain light, it could just as easily be a science experiment gone wrong. You contemplate the effort it would take to get up, boil water, and make coffee, if you actually had coffee, or water, or matches. But the truth is, the line between making something happen and just lying here a little longer is as thin as the blanket you're using for warmth. You roll over, trying to avoid the chill that lives between the rags and the wall, and immediately regret it. Your back protests, your knees pop, and the faded poster of Josephine Baker stares down at you with the kind of judgment only a true icon can muster. Somewhere outside, a tram rattles by, and you can hear the distant strains of a trumpet. Paris never really sleeps, but it's not above kicking you when you're down. Let's talk about the decor. If shabby chic had a rock-bottom cousin, this would be it. One chair, missing two legs. A writing desk that is really just an upturned crate. Your wardrobe is a nail in the wall, and your best shirt is currently doubling as a draft excluder. The only art on the wall is a mysterious brown stain, and you've convinced yourself it's an early Picasso, but you're not alone. Not really. In 1920s Paris, there are thousands just like you. Dreamers, drifters, addicts, and artists, all stacked on top of each other in these lopsided buildings, all waking up with the same question: how do I get through today? It's a life romanticized by novels, but in reality, The biggest mystery isn't love or art, but whether you'll ever have exact change for the bakery downstairs. The air is a blend of cheap tobacco, last night's rain, and something sour you can't identify and don't dare to investigate. You find your notebook under a pile of dirty laundry and try to write something meaningful. Nothing comes out but a doodle of a croissant fighting a cigarette for dominance. Outside, Paris wakes up whether you do or not. There's bread to be baked, jazz to be played, and 1,000 stories happening on the street below. But here, in your garret, time moves slower. Every second is stretched by fatigue and hope. You promise yourself, as you do every morning, that today will be different. Today, you'll resist. You'll create. You'll be the poet you always wanted to be, or at least, you'll make it downstairs without tripping on your own coat. And that, in the world of the Parisian garret, is enough. For now, it's time for breakfast, and if you were expecting anything resembling nutrition, think again. The only thing on the menu is a chipped cup of black coffee, a cigarette, and a brief debate with yourself over whether heroin pairs better with jam or existential despair. The garret is still half dark. As you shuffle across the floor, your bare feet sticky against the waxy boards, looking for yesterday's crust of bread. You swore you had a croissant somewhere. Maybe it rolled under the bed. Maybe you hallucinated the whole thing. The closest thing to a balanced meal here is balancing your coffee on the windowsill and hoping it doesn't plunge 4 stories onto a passing philosopher. There's no fridge, no fruit, and certainly no cheerful French grandmother with a tray of fresh brioche. Instead, you light a cigarette. It's not a real breakfast, but at least the nicotine reminds your body that it's time to wake up. You inhale deeply, the smoke scratching your throat, mixing with the faint scent of rain coming through the leaky window. The coffee is cold, but it's still better than the tap water, which tastes like a history lesson in rust and questionable pipes. Every swallow is a calculated risk. You sip anyway, because in Paris, caffeine is cheaper than hope. Let's talk about the croissant. If you're lucky, really lucky, you might find one in the bakery downstairs, still warm, layers flaking off with each hesitant bite. But that's only if you have the coins and the nerve to face Madame Fournier, whose stare is as sharp as her bread knife. She knows you're behind on your tab. She knows you're a writer, or an artist, or just another dropout playing at Bohemia. She gives you the pastry, but not without a sigh that says, "Try not to die on my doorstep." Back in your room, you tear into the croissant, washing it down with more coffee. But your stomach's not quite sure what to do with real food. It's been trained on a diet of cigarettes, black caffeine, and whatever questionable powder you picked up at the club last night. Breakfast is a negotiation. How much can you eat before the anxiety takes over? Before your hands start to shake? Before the cravings really kick in? On the table, a single spoon glints in the early sunlight. The same spoon you use for coffee, for stirring sugar, for other, less savory purposes. You think about using it, just a little, just to take the edge off, but you hesitate. You always hesitate, right before you don't. Paris mornings are noisy. There's the clatter of horse-drawn carts, the bellow of the market vendors, the distant sound of someone practicing the saxophone, badly, for the 3rd day in a row. You try to ignore it all, focusing instead on the ritual of breakfast, the tiny everyday ceremony of pretending you have things under control. You line up the coffee cup, the half cigarette, the croissant, and stare at them like they might provide some meaning, some reason to get through the day. But there's no meaning here, not really. Just calories and chemistry, battling for dominance in your bloodstream. Breakfast is less about nourishment and more about staving off the come-down, a gentle reminder that your body is a stubborn machine, still trying to keep you alive despite your best efforts. You tell yourself you'll go easy today, maybe just one hit, maybe none at all. You make promises to yourself in the quiet hour between breakfast and regret, the hour where anything seems possible. Tomorrow, you'll eat fruit. Tomorrow, you'll write a poem. Tomorrow, you'll quit. But for now, you scrape the last crumbs into your palm, down the bitter dregs of coffee, and smoke the filter down to your fingers. Outside, Paris is waking up, louder, brighter, utterly indifferent. For everyone else, breakfast is a beginning. For you, it's just the first negotiation of the day. And as the sweat starts to gather at your temples, you wonder, for the 100th time, if anyone ever really tastes their croissant in the city of dreams, or if everyone is just pretending, one cold, hungry bite at a time. Montmartre is the heart of Bohemia, and also the only neighborhood where you can buy both a painting and a packet of powder before noon. The hills are steep, but not as steep as your rent, or your slide into chemical oblivion. You start the morning with ambition. Today you'll climb the steps, see the sun rise over Sacré-Cœur, maybe even pretend you're in a Renoir painting, minus the healthy cheeks and general optimism. Montmartre wakes up slowly, like someone with a hangover they're desperately trying to hide. Every cobblestone is slick with last night's rain, or maybe just last night's spilled secrets. Your shoes are already wet, and you haven't even passed the first wine shop. Artists and addicts shuffle out at the same hour, drawn to the light, and the chance of a new day, or at least a new distraction. Painters in berets lug canvases to the Place de Tertre, hoping for tourists with francs to spare. You, meanwhile, have other errands. There's a dealer who sets up behind the cabaret, a poet-turned-pharmacist who doles out advice with the powder. He claims it's all for creative inspiration, but he's been using the same rhyme scheme for 3 years. You stop to watch a street artist draw caricatures for a group of Americans. He captures their noses, their smiles, and the vague whiff of homesickness they can't quite wash off in French water. The Americans don't see you, and you're glad. Nobody in Montmartre wants witnesses for what they're really doing at this hour. The climb gets harder as you go. Each step is a negotiation between your lungs and your legs, and both are demanding a raise. The street narrows, twisting up past bakeries and shuttered jazz bars. Someone's always playing an accordion nearby, the notes winding through the air like smoke. It's supposed to be romantic, but right now it just sounds like the soundtrack to a slow-motion disaster. You reach the little alley where the deals happen, always at the edge of something beautiful. The city below glitters in the morning haze, rooftops stacked like dirty dishes. Your dealer is waiting, perched on a crumbling stone wall, smoking a cigarette as if Paris herself might fall apart if he doesn't. He nods at you. No small talk, just business. You hand over your last few coins and receive a small folded packet, more precious than gold, more dangerous than hope. There's a ritual to all this. The way you keep your eyes on the ground, the way you count your change, the way you promise yourself this, is just to get you through the week, the day, the next hour. The dealer disappears as quickly as he arrived. In Montmartre, nobody lingers. You never know who's watching, and the gendarmes are always just a wrong turn away. You find a quiet spot behind a shuttered cafe, light a cigarette, and get to work. The first hit is a relief, not because it feels good, but because it quiets everything else. The aching legs, the empty stomach, the endless parade of bills and regrets, all dissolve in a haze of white smoke and borrowed time. For a few minutes, you're not in Paris at all. You're somewhere soft and far away, where nothing hurts and nothing is urgent. But Montmartre doesn't let you hide for long. The city pulls you back with the smell of baking bread, the laughter of tourists, the sharp whistle of a policeman at the bottom of the hill. You gather yourself, stash what's left of the powder, and head back into the sunlight, blending into a crowd of strangers who all look like they've got somewhere better to be. Chasing the dragon in Montmartre is never about the high. It's about escaping gravity for a little while, drifting above your problems, your cravings, your unfinished canvases, and unpaid rent. But eventually, the climb always ends. The hill flattens out, the euphoria fades, and you're left where you started, standing in the shadow of the basilica, wondering how many more steps you have in you before the city and your body give out. Heroin might be illegal, technically, but the right pharmacist, a little charm, and a forged letter from Dr. Sigmund Freud can get you almost anything. Just try not to get the dosage mixed up with the cough syrup. You begin your day rehearsing lines in the cracked bathroom mirror. Bonjour, monsieur. Je suis terribly afflicted. A gentle cough for effect. Is that too dramatic? Maybe you should have worn the tie. But then, would a sick man wear a tie? Existential questions swirl around your head, all before your second cup of terrible coffee. You smooth your hair, tuck the forged prescription into your coat pocket, and try not to look as guilty as you feel. The pharmacy sits on the corner, sandwiched between a bakery and a shop selling hats for dogs. The green cross above the door flickers with a promise of legal relief, if only you can survive the interrogation. Parisian pharmacists, you quickly discover, are more suspicious than the police, and twice as chatty. The bell jingles as you enter. Every head turns, including Madame Bouchard, who is here for her monthly liniment, and who will absolutely remember if you stammer. You shuffle forward, clutching your fake prescription, hoping the ink hasn't smudged. The counter is marble, cold and hard. Behind it, the pharmacist, Monsieur Dupont, peers down at you through round spectacles, eyebrow arched like a question mark. He's seen it all. The trembling hands, the creative coughs, the sudden flu outbreaks among young men in corduroy jackets. You hand over your paper, trying to keep your hands steady. "Dr. Freud, you say?" he asks, voice dripping with skepticism and a hint of amusement. You nod, attempting to look both grateful and gravely ill, a performance worthy of the Parisian stage. In truth, you couldn't name a single symptom that matches your condition. Is it insomnia? Nerves? All of the above, you say, which somehow sounds just plausible enough to earn a slow, assessing nod. Dupont examines the letter, then you. He squints, as if he's seen you on the street corner at 2 a.m., which, to be fair, he might have. He makes you wait, fussing with scales and tiny bottles, muttering in French about dosage and the dangers of youth. Every second ticks louder. You scan the shelves behind him. Laudanum, morphine, all the ghosts of Parisian ailments lined up in neat glass rows. You wonder how many of those bottles are destined for patients and how many for people like you, living somewhere between a diagnosis and a confession. Finally, with a theatrical sigh, he returns. "This will help. But be careful, monsieur. It is very strong." He slides the tiny vial across the counter, wrapped discreetly in brown paper. You try not to look too relieved. You pay in coins, counting them twice. The world's most stressful transaction. Dupont looks you in the eye and says, "Next time, try chamomile tea. You promise you will, knowing full well you won't." Back on the street, the city feels brighter. You made it out. The vial burns a hole in your pocket. You hurry away, resisting the urge to check if Madame Bouchard is following you, ready to rat you out at the next bridge club. The pharmacy hustle is equal parts luck and performance art. One wrong word, and you're leaving with nothing but a stern lecture and a small bag of lozenges. Some days, it doesn't work. Some days, the prescription gets a suspicious once-over and is handed back with a disapproving frown. You shuffle out empty-handed, practicing new signatures for next time. Other days, you're recognized from last week, and the pharmacist simply sighs, shakes his head, and sells you exactly what you came for. Everybody knows the game. The trick is pretending you're not playing it. As you walk home, you wonder if this is how real patients feel, clutching their medicine in trembling hands, hoping it will make everything better. You know it won't, not really. But in 1926 Paris, hope comes bottled, with a handwritten label and the faintest smell of almonds. And as you slip the vial into your coat and disappear into the city, you promise yourself this is the last time, just like you promised yesterday. Every night, the jazz bands play loud enough to shake your molars loose, but you're not here for the music. You're here for the crowd, the smoke, and the chance that someone in the bathroom line has what you're really looking for. You step into the club like you're entering a different climate zone. Outside, Paris is cold and damp and vaguely judgmental, like it just watched you lose an argument with a baguette. Inside, everything is heat. Hot bodies packed shoulder to shoulder, hot lamps burning through cigarette haze, hot brass blaring straight into your skull, like the trumpet player personally hates your nervous system. The air smells like sweat, spilled gin, perfume, cheap cologne, and a kind of sweet, chemical undertone that makes your stomach tighten with recognition. The doorman barely looks at you. He's seen you before. Not you specifically, Because in this place everyone looks like they haven't slept since the Treaty of Versailles. But he knows your type, the hollow-eyed, overly calm, slightly sweaty person in a coat that's too thin for the season and too heavy with secrets. You slip him a coin, he nods, and you're in. The club is dim enough that you can pretend your life is mysterious instead of falling apart. That's the real magic of Paris nightlife. A candlelit corner turns you from exhausted wreck into tortured artist. A glass of wine makes you look intentional, even if you're drinking it, because water is still a gamble and your hands won't stop shaking. You weave through the crowd, brushing elbows with people who talk too loudly about art and too softly about money. Everyone here is either famous, pretending to be famous, or famous in a way that only matters at 2 a.m. You pass a writer at the bar, arguing passionately about symbolism while his eyelid twitches like it's trying to escape his face. You pass a woman in a cloche hat and pearls, laughing like she's invincible, her lipstick flawless, her pupils suspiciously relaxed. You pass a man selling cigarettes out of his coat like a traveling minister of bad decisions. Somewhere someone yells, "Vive la liberté!" And everyone cheers, not because they mean it, but because it sounds better than "I am deeply unwell." Let's talk about the music for a second. It's supposed to be jazz. It's supposed to be freedom, improvisation, the pulse of modernity. But right now, it's just a wall of sound. The drummer is possessed. The trumpet is a warning. The saxophone is crying. And you're standing there trying to look cool while your brain quietly calculates how long you can stay without collapsing or sweating through your last clean shirt. You order something, anything. A drink arrives in a cloudy glass. It might be absinthe. It might be diluted gasoline. Either way, you sip it and let it burn a warm little line down your throat. Alcohol is a social lubricant, sure, but in this world, it's also a bandage. It doesn't fix anything. It just makes the bleeding feel poetic. And that's when you see it, the real reason you came. Not the band, not the laughter, not the flirtation. The bathroom line. It's always the bathroom line. The line is long, chaotic, and full of people who look like they've been waiting since last Wednesday. And the strangest part is nobody is in a hurry. Because the bathroom isn't just a bathroom. It's a marketplace, a confession booth, a little back alley universe where the city's most desperate transactions happen between cracked mirrors and wet floorboards. You step into the line and suddenly you're surrounded by quiet negotiations. A man in a fedora leans toward another and whispers a question that could mean anything. A woman slips a small packet from her glove like she's offering a mint. Someone coughs, twice, and that's apparently a signal. It's like a secret society, except the initiation ritual is mild self-destruction and the membership fee is your future. You stand there, pretending you're just here to pee like a normal person, like you don't have a heartbeat that's too fast and a craving that's too loud. You avoid eye contact, because eye contact in these places is dangerous. You might end up buying something. You might end up owing someone. You might end up being invited into a conversation that ends with you in a stairwell making decisions you'll regret by breakfast. Finally, you reach the door. The bathroom itself is tiny. The mirror is cracked. The sink barely works. The smell is a mix of perfume and bleach and a faint sadness that no amount of soap can fix. You lock the door and stare at your reflection. Your face looks older than it should. Your eyes are tired. Your hands are steady, only when you hold them perfectly still. You open your coat, check your pocket, and for a moment, you just breathe. Slow, controlled. Like you're trying to convince your body you're safe. Because here's the thing about jazz clubs in Paris. They feel like freedom, but they're really a trap dressed in velvet and trumpet solos. Everyone is chasing something. Music, love, meaning, relief. And you're chasing the one thing that promises quiet. A little warmth inside the bones. A little silence in the mind. You do what you came to do. You hide it well. You wash your hands like you're innocent. You step back out into the club, where the band is still playing like the world is ending beautifully. And for a while, it almost works. You sway to the rhythm. You smile at someone you don't know. You laugh at something you don't understand. The smoke curls around you like a protective spell. But then you notice a sting on your arm, a little mark, a little bruise, a little reminder. Because in this club, the music fades, the crowd changes, the night ends, but the needle marks, those stay. And that, my friend, is the most loyal relationship in Paris. Picasso's got a new painting. Gertrude Stein is hosting another salon, and half the guests are arguing about metaphysics, while the other half are trying to find a vein. Welcome to the Parisian avant-garde, where genius and disaster walk arm in arm. You receive the invitation, if you can call it that, a smudged postcard, a scribbled address, or just a whispered rumor passed from one sleepless friend to another. The salons of Paris are legendary, but only if you can find the right staircase, the right knock, the right code word. Cubism is popular this week, but so is chaos. You arrive, breathless and late, and the whole apartment is pulsing. Jazz on the gramophone, the air thick with cigarette smoke and words no one's listening to. The room is equal parts perfume and panic. Here in the heart of the avant-garde, everyone is trying to outdo each other in both brilliance and self-destruction. The poets are drunk, the dancers are high, and the painters are halfway between finishing their masterpiece and setting it on fire. Someone is reciting Rimbaud from a windowsill, threatening to jump if anyone tries to correct his pronunciation. The hostess, swaddled in silk scarves and good intentions, floats through the crowd offering cheap wine and more dangerous substances with the same effortless hospitality. Your first conversation is with a man who claims to be translating Homer into Esperanto. He asks if you'd like to collaborate, then immediately forgets your name. Next, you're swept up in a circle discussing art theory. Are the lines of a painting supposed to mean something, or are they just there to confuse the bourgeoisie? Someone insists beauty is dead. Someone else insists beauty just needs a new dealer. All of this is punctuated by the sudden arrival of a stray cat, who, naturally, becomes the guest of honor for the next 20 minutes. There's always a corner where the real party is happening, the addicts. They sit huddled together, giggling at nothing, passing a flask and a tin and stories about last night's adventures that may or may not be true. You catch a snatch of conversation. I wrote a symphony in 3 hours. I sold a painting to a duchess. I woke up in the river, again. Laughter is contagious and sad. Like everyone is one bad punchline away from tears. On the wall, Picasso's newest painting is displayed, a mess of color and angles, as if the world itself got too tired to stand upright. People nod, frown, pretend to understand. One man whispers, "Genius." Another mutters, "Insanity." The truth, as always in Paris, is probably both. You move through the crowd, picking up half-formed ideas and half-empty glasses. Someone tries to kiss you in the hallway. Someone else asks if you have a light, then tells you the secret to happiness is never being sober in the first place. You spot a famous critic passed out on the divan, a heroine of the ballet quietly swapping her point shoes for slippers, and a sculptor explaining, with great intensity, why all real art must hurt. It's impossible to know if you're inspired or exhausted. The noise never lets up, the stories never quite add up, and every few minutes someone calls for silence, so they can make a grand speech that devolves into giggles halfway through. If you're lucky, you'll leave with a new friend, a new poem, or at least a loaf of bread someone stole from the kitchen. By the end of the night, everyone is a little bit in love with everyone else, or at least with the idea of never having to sober up. You stumble into the street, pockets empty, head spinning, and realize that here, in the madness of Montparnasse, there are only 2 rules. Genius is always just a hair's breadth from disaster, and if you don't fit in, you're probably exactly where you're supposed to be. You wonder, just for a moment, what history will remember. The art, the parties, or the quietly desperate souls who tried to live forever in a single Parisian night. Some people come to Paris for the absinthe. You came for something a little stronger, but the rituals are the same. Pour, stir, sip, and stare out the window as reality slowly unravels. Absinthe is the kind of drink that feels like it was invented by a haunted librarian with a personal vendetta against stability. It's green. It's bitter. It smells like licorice and bad decisions. And the people who drink it always look like they're either about to create a masterpiece or write a 10-page letter to their ex in perfect cursive. There is no in-between. You slip into a cafe, one of those dim little places where the chairs are always sticky, and the waiters have the quiet exhaustion of men who've watched too many people collapse romantically. The air is warm with smoke and stale perfume, and the windows are fogged just enough to make the street outside look like a blurry dream. Perfect. This is where Paris hides its most fragile people. Behind glass, behind drinks, behind the illusion that everything is intentional. You order absinthe like you belong here, like you're not just borrowing someone else's aesthetic. The waiter sets down the glass with a small clink, then adds the ritual equipment, the spoon, the sugar cube, the water drip. Absinthe isn't just a drink, it's a ceremony. And in Paris, ceremonies make you feel less like you're spiraling. You set the sugar cube on the slotted spoon, position it like you're performing surgery, and begin to drip cold water over it slowly. The cube dissolves into the emerald liquid, turning it cloudy and pale, like the drink is giving up its secrets. As you stir, you can almost convince yourself this is about sophistication, about art, about being part of the city's glittering mythology, but you know the truth. This isn't really about the drink. It's about the pause, the small, sacred moment where you don't have to be anything except a person with a glass in front of them. No obligations, no future. Just the drip, drip, drip of water like a hypnotist, counting down until you stop caring. You take a sip, and it hits like a cold slap from someone wearing velvet gloves. Sharp, herbal, almost medicinal. It feels like it could cure you or ruin you, depending on how much you're willing to pour down your throat. For a moment, your stomach clenches in protest. Then your body starts to soften around it, loosening just a little, like you've turned down the volume on your own thoughts. This is why people loved absinthe. Not because it made them hallucinate fairies, though some swore it did, but because it gave them permission to drift, to stare out the window at Paris's gray streets, and imagine the world was poetic instead of cruel. But you came for something else, didn't you? Absinthe is a socially acceptable kind of self-destruction, a public indulgence. You can drink it in broad daylight, wearing a respectable coat, and nobody calls you an addict. They call you an artist. They call you bohemian. They call you complicated. Meanwhile, if you pull out a packet of white powder, suddenly you're not romantic anymore. Suddenly, you're a problem. So, you keep the rituals separate. Green fairy in public, white powder in private. Like you're somehow maintaining standards. And yet the rituals are the same. The careful preparation, the slow anticipation, the first sip, the first hit, the first moment when your shoulders unclench and you feel your brain stop screaming. Whether it's absinthe or heroin, what you're chasing isn't the high, it's the hush, the quiet, the little pocket of silence where your life doesn't feel like a collapsing building. You look around the cafe, a couple in the corner whispering, their faces close together like a conspiracy. A man at the counter staring into his glass like he's trying to find his soul at the bottom. A woman in pearls tapping her cigarette ash with perfect elegance, her eyes far away, already halfway gone. Everyone here has their own fairy, their own powder, their own way of slipping sideways out of reality. Outside, Paris continues its daily march. Bread is delivered, horses clop by. A street vendor shouts something cheerful. The city doesn't stop for anyone, but inside the cafe, time slows. The drink warms your throat, the smoke clings to your hair. The world feels softer, almost merciful. And then, inevitably, the absinthe runs low. You stare at the last inch of green in the glass, and you feel the familiar panic flutter in your chest. Not a dramatic panic, not the kind you'd admit to. Just a quiet fear that the soft, numb curtain is about to lift. That reality is waiting right outside the fogged window, sharpening its claws. So you drain the glass. You place it down gently, like you're being respectful to the illusion, and you tell yourself you're fine. Because in Paris, everyone is fine, right up until they're not. And if absinthe is the green fairy, then heroin is her older, colder sister, the one who doesn't flirt, the one who doesn't sparkle. the one who simply takes you by the hand and leads you somewhere quiet, somewhere you might not come back from. But for now, you just sit there, breathing slowly, watching the world blur, thinking, maybe just for tonight, that the ferry is enough. And that might be the funniest lie of all. In Paris, you're only as safe as your next alias. The police have lists, the local dealers have better lists, and nobody trusts anyone except for the cat, who is absolutely judging your life choices. It starts innocently enough. Maybe you use a nickname at the club, just to keep your family name out of the gossipy wind. Maybe you borrow your roommate's ID for a pharmacy run, or invent a new profession whenever someone asks. In Paris, you can reinvent yourself nightly. Poet by morning, painter by noon, ghost by dusk. You're as slippery as the Seine, and nearly as unpredictable. But the city has a way of keeping tabs. Police patrol the boulevards, eyes sharp for faces that don't match yesterday's paperwork. Their lists are long, filled with petty thieves, missing artists, and, most importantly, anyone too clever for their own good. Meanwhile, the dealers have a database that's more reliable than City Hall. They know who paid on time, who snitched, who owes, and who suddenly developed a mysterious accent and a limp. You begin to develop habits. Never visit the same cafe 2 nights in a row. Always pay in cash. If you hear your own name in public, you keep walking. Trust is a luxury you simply can't afford. You remember what happened to poor Henry, if that was his real name, who once bragged a little too loudly about his connections. Next morning, he was on a train to Lyon, courtesy of a police escort. Or so the story goes. In truth, nobody ever saw him again. The paranoia creeps in slowly, like a draft under the door. You start to double-check the locks, triple-check your pockets, and scan every crowded room for familiar faces. Is that man at the bar watching you, or just trying to decide between cognac and vermouth? Is the landlord's dog suddenly barking at your window because it knows, or because it's just a dog with strong opinions? Let's talk about the aliases. You've used so many that sometimes you answer to the wrong one by mistake. Jean for the doctor, Louis for the grocer, Gaspard for when you want to sound especially mysterious. Some days you barely remember your real name, and it's just as well. Names are liabilities. Names are receipts for things you'd rather forget. The police, of course, love a good chase. They show up at odd hours, knocking on doors, flashing badges, asking polite questions with not-so-polite undertones. You haven't seen a Monsieur Lefebvre, have you? As if you'd ever admit it if you had. Sometimes they're just bored, and you're an easy target. Sometimes, it's because someone recognized you at the wrong moment, when you were leaving a certain alley, with a certain package, you absolutely did not want to explain. And the dealers, well, they play their own game. If you're useful, you're safe. If you're unreliable, you're a problem. Information flows in whispers. Watch out for that one. He's been talking to the wrong people. Or, more ominously, she owes me and she's running out of time. One wrong move, and you're blacklisted. Or worse, listed. And yet, the strangest part is how normal it all feels after a while. You get used to the secrecy, the shadows, the coded greetings, and the constant mental math. You start to understand why the cat never gets caught. It trusts no one, sleeps with one eye open, and never tells the same story twice. In this world, being interesting is dangerous. Too many people know your face, your voice, your vices. You try to stay anonymous, but anonymity is a full-time job. You can change your name, your coat, your story, but Paris always remembers. The city holds grudges, even if it forgets birthdays. So you play the game. You trust the cat, avoid the police, keep your stories straight, and hope that tomorrow you're still just a rumor on someone else's list. Not a headline, not a cautionary tale, not a missing person poster tacked up beside the metro. Because in the end, the only thing riskier than being invisible in Paris is being unforgettable. Flappers make addiction look glamorous, or at least less sweaty. With bobbed hair, cloche hats, and eyes rimmed in kohl, they lounge in smoky corners and trade secrets about the best spot for a discreet fix. It's a strange talent, turning self-destruction into a fashion statement, But the flappers of Paris in the 1920s do it with effortless grace. You walk into the club and immediately spot them, half goddess, half trouble. They recline on velvet banquettes, lipstick perfect, posture impeccable, as if they've just stepped out of a magazine and directly into last night's after-party. Their laughter is brittle and bright, slicing through the jazz and cigarette smoke, and everyone in the room leans a little closer just to hear the punchline. Fashion in this world isn't just about the latest dress, it's about camouflage. Loose silk frocks hide trembling hands, long beaded necklaces distract from the bruises that bloom in the crooks of elbows. There's an art to looking unbothered, a kind of high-gloss choreography that only works if you keep your secrets tucked behind rouge and rhinestones. Shoes are impractical, purses impossibly small, but every accessory serves a purpose, to signal that you are above all this, even if you're barely holding it together. The men try to keep up, of course. There are dandies and dilettantes in perfectly pressed suits, their hair slicked back with enough pomade to withstand a hurricane. They flash silver cigarette cases, tell stories about how they once drank with Hemingway or played chess with a prince. It's all performance. Under the bravado, their hands are just as shaky, their eyes just as hungry. Let's talk about the rituals. In the powder room, flappers gather to powder their noses, sometimes with actual powder, sometimes with the other kind. They swap tiny vials and sly advice. Which pharmacy to visit, which doctor will write a sympathetic prescription, which bouncer is willing to look the other way. The mirrors are smudged, the secrets are sacred, and there's a quiet solidarity in the way they check each other's eyeliner before heading back out to the dance floor. The dance itself is a test of endurance. Charleston, shimmy, repeat. The club's energy is frenetic, contagious, but for the flappers, it's as much about distraction as celebration. They twirl, they laugh, they drink deeply from glasses that never seem to empty. Every movement is calculated to keep the spotlight moving. Don't linger too long, don't let the mask slip. They don't sweat, they glisten, they don't stumble, they glide. It would be easy to envy them, these icons of insouciance. Their style is copied in magazines, their slang on everyone's lips. They make addiction look like an accessory, a minor inconvenience instead of the gnawing, restless thing it really is. But you see it, if you look closely enough, the moments when the music softens and they let their guard drop. A hand pressed too tightly to a forehead, a shiver hidden by a burst of laughter, a cigarette smoked down to the filter in a single drag. Vulnerability, as fleeting as the flash of a camera. What nobody tells you is how much work it takes to look unbothered. It's not just the clothes, or the makeup, or the dance steps. It's the relentless maintenance of myth, the effort to stay a little mysterious, a little unreachable. The flappers know, if you never admit to struggling, nobody will ask you to stop. So you keep moving, keep smiling, keep perfecting the art of appearing untouched by the chaos swirling around you. In the early morning, when the club empties out and the flappers file into the dawn, you might catch one or two standing quietly in the gray light, shoes dangling from tired fingers, mascara smudged just so. For a moment, they look almost ordinary, just girls waiting for a taxi, a friend, a new day. But then the sun catches the sequins on their dress, and the magic returns. The world wants to believe in heroin chic, and so, for a few more hours, it does. But even here, behind the glamour, you know the truth. Nobody makes it look easy forever. The art of looking unbothered is just that, art. And underneath, the flappers are just as human, just as breakable as the rest of us. Only better dressed. Romance blooms in the unlikeliest places, like the waiting room of a free clinic or over a shared bottle of laudanum. Nothing says I adore you like offering your last cigarette or holding someone's hand during withdrawal. Paris in the 1920s is a city for lovers, or so the postcards claim. But you quickly learn that not every romance is written in rose petals and moonlight. Sometimes love is a shaky promise, whispered in the alley behind a jazz club or scribbled on the back of a pharmacy receipt. In this world, hearts don't beat faster because of poetry or passion. They beat faster because the laudanum's finally kicking in. You meet your paramour by accident, naturally. Maybe it's the shuffle of chairs in a charity doctor's waiting room. the two of you united by mutual boredom and a mutual need for something stronger than aspirin. Maybe it's on a rainy afternoon, when you both reach for the same sticky bottle of cough syrup in a corner shop and end up splitting it under the awning, hands brushing in the drizzle. There's no chivalry here, just the practical romance of survival, sharing warmth, sharing a blanket, sharing enough coins to buy 2 cups of coffee, and, if luck holds, a little something to make the hours blur. Dates are rarely candlelit dinners. More likely, it's 2 of you huddled together on a park bench, knees knocking, passing a flask of something bitter and medicinal. You trade stories about better times, or maybe you make them up, because in Paris the truth is always negotiable. Your declarations of love are laced with gallows humor. If we both make it through the week, I'll take you to the fancy cafe, promise. Sometimes, if you're both feeling grand, you splurge on a single apple tart and a cup of real, non-instant coffee. This is what passes for luxury, and you treat it with the reverence it deserves. Physical affection, too, takes on a practical edge. A hand squeezed tightly on the worst nights. A shoulder offered when the shivers hit. If you're lucky, someone will hum quietly while you grit your teeth through a cold sweat. You learn each other's patterns, when the pain comes, when the hunger peaks, when the craving sharpens from background noise to a hurricane. And in those moments, love is just being present, staying put, even when every instinct tells you to run or curl up alone. Intimacy becomes an exercise in honesty. You can't really hide the worst parts of yourself in a tiny garret room, not when you're both living at the edge of your own tolerance. There's no time for coyness or mystery when you're helping someone tie off an arm or counting out pills together in the half-light. Your love letters aren't poems, but small, everyday acts of kindness. Half a sandwich wrapped in yesterday's newsprint, an extra scarf pressed into cold hands, the last bit of sugar for someone else's coffee. Of course, there are fights, arguments over money, over missed appointments, over whose turn it is to sweet-talk the pharmacist. Sometimes the strain is too much, and the city feels like it's pushing you apart, one running north, the other south, both pretending they don't care. But, inevitably, you find your way back to each other. The city is vast, but the circles of those who understand your particular heartbreak are small. You always end up together again, sharing the same bed, the same aching hope that next week things will be better. And when you love someone here, you love them fiercely, because you never know if you'll see them tomorrow or if Paris will swallow them up like so many other beautiful broken things. So you hold hands tightly in the street, laugh too loudly at private jokes, and say, "I love you," as if it might be the last thing either of you hears. This is what passes for romance in the time of laudanum. The ordinary miracles of not being alone, of being seen and accepted. Even when your hands shake and your eyes are too tired to focus. You survive together, and in a city built on stories, that's the best one you've got. Because in Paris, love isn't a grand gesture or a cinematic kiss on the bridge at midnight. It's the quiet comfort of another addict's arms, the solidarity of 2 lost souls, choosing, again and again, not to let go. Finding a reliable dealer is trickier than dodging your landlord. They lurk in the shadows, blending in with the street artists and accordion players, all promising pure product and delivering existential crisis. In the swirling chaos of 1920s Paris, everyone knows someone who knows someone. Your neighbor's cousin's friend sells questionable cigarettes. The woman who paints by the Seine has a side business in laudanum. But when it comes to heroin, finding the real thing, the good stuff, the safe stuff, or at least the kind that won't make your ears ring for a week, takes more than just word of mouth. It's a daily scavenger hunt, part networking, part luck, and all nerves. The first lesson: never trust the ones who offer too much. The best dealers don't need to advertise. They move quietly, slipping through alleyways and crowded cafes, their faces familiar but forgettable. Today, he might be sketching portraits in Montmartre. Tomorrow, he's tuning a battered accordion outside a brasserie. The only consistent trait is inconsistency. They change names more often than you change socks, and if you ever call them by the wrong one, expect a look that could sour milk. You soon realize the underworld operates on its own set of rules, a shadowy etiquette that nobody writes down but everyone knows. Passwords and code words are exchanged in place of greetings. Asking directly is a rookie mistake. Instead, you drop hints about LeBlanc, or simply mention a shared acquaintance. If the dealer trusts you, you'll get a nod and a time. If not, you'll get silence, or worse, a warning glare from a hulking bouncer. But even when you make the connection, nothing is certain. A deal can unravel at the drop of a hat. Sometimes you're sent to wait on a particular bench, only to spend an hour watching pigeons while your contact vanishes into thin air. Other times, you're led through a maze of courtyards, up 3 flights of creaking stairs, and into a room so full of smoke and strangers, you wonder if you've stumbled into an avant-garde performance art piece by accident. The doppelganger problem is real too. Dealers protect themselves by sending lookalikes or stand-ins, cousins, friends, or people who just happen to dress similarly. One day your dealer is a red-haired man with a limp. The next it's a woman in a blue scarf insisting you've met before. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. It's a world of shifting masks, where trust is measured in teaspoons and eye contact is strictly rationed. Of course, the stakes are high. The police know all the tricks, and undercover agents love nothing more than busting up a well-organized network. Rumors swirl of sting operations where the dealer is actually a cop, and the first sign of trouble is when your friend starts asking just a few too many questions. Caution becomes second nature. You practice your story for the gendarmes in your head, perfecting your wide-eyed innocence. Me? I'm just here for the accordion lessons. But it's not all danger. Sometimes, navigating the underworld feels like being part of a secret club. The handshake, the whispered greeting, the nervous laugh when a delivery goes right. In the dingy backrooms of Paris, there's camaraderie in the shared hustle, an unspoken bond between people trying to outrun the same shadow. You swap tips on safe meeting spots, on which bakeries double as drop-off points, on which street musicians are in the know. And yet, for all the connections, you're always alone at the moment of truth. You hand over your money, never too much, never too little, and hope what you get is what you were promised. The dealer vanishes as quickly as they appeared, leaving you standing in the street, clutching a small packet and your own gnawing doubts. Trust, in the Parisian underworld, is a game with no winners. The best you can hope for is survival, making it through another night, another deal, another dance with the city's endless cast of dealers and doppelgangers. You walk away with your prize, heart pounding, already planning your next move and wondering who you'll meet tomorrow, a friend, a stranger, or just another face in the crowd, promising you the world and delivering another beautiful, terrifying day in Paris. Eventually, every party in Paris ends, usually with a crash that feels like getting hit by a runaway Citroën. The sheets are silk, but the sweats and shakes feel the same as they do in any ratty boarding house. It turns out there's no such thing as a comfortable withdrawal. Not in the Ritz, not in a garret, not in a friend's borrowed bed. No matter how thick the mattress or how soft the pillow, heroin comes for you with the same ugly determination. You could be surrounded by gold-plated taps and bellboys who call you monsieur, but none of that matters when your own skin is the enemy and your bones are on fire. It usually starts in the quietest hour. Maybe you're lying there, staring at the chandelier and pretending you're just too warm or too cold, or maybe you're just too aware of how expensive this room is and how much you don't belong in it. Then the first little tremors start. Your fingers won't quite hold still. Your feet twist against the smooth sheets, seeking some position that isn't unbearable. You try to breathe deeply, but every breath tastes wrong, too sweet, too sharp, too much like regret. You hear the faint clink of room service trolleys in the hall, someone laughing down the corridor, a distant jazz tune floating up from the lobby. The world outside continues, perfectly oblivious, while you begin the private ritual of suffering. You sit up, sweat already beading on your forehead, the silk pajamas clinging to your back like a desperate memory. The clock ticks, louder than a drum, each second stretching to eternity. Withdrawal is a lonely business, but at the Ritz, it's isolation on a grand scale. In a crowded boarding house, misery loves company, moans and curses, advice from an old-timer in the next bed. Here, there's only your reflection in a gilded mirror, reminding you that you're not nearly as glamorous as you looked at midnight, dancing in borrowed finery with the promise of more to come. Let's talk about the indignity of it all. You stumble to the bathroom, marble everything, gold fixtures, towels so thick they could double as mattresses. But your stomach turns itself inside out just the same. You shake so hard you nearly drop the glass, and the water tastes like nothing, or maybe shame. There's no room service for this. No bellhop with a solution. You could ask for more champagne, but that only quiets the nerves for a heartbeat. You try distraction. You flip through a magazine, something glossy, full of advertisements for things nobody really needs. The models look back at you, serene and untouched. You wonder if they've ever sweated through a withdrawal in couture. Probably not, but then again, Paris is full of secrets. You switch on the radio, hoping for music, but everything sounds hollow, each trumpet note reminding you of the party you can't go back to. In the early hours, the sun begins to pry at the curtains. Paris looks innocent again, fresh and golden, as if the night never happened. You lie on top of the tangled sheets, exhausted but wide awake, calculating how long until you can safely check out and disappear without meeting anyone's eyes. You think about calling a friend, but nobody wants to hear from you at this hour. Not when you have nothing to offer but apologies and a request for just a little help, just this once. You promise yourself, as always, that this is the last time, that you'll clean up, that you'll change. The promise feels good for a few minutes, a warm blanket over the shaking. But then the ache returns, stronger than before, reminding you that even at the Ritz, even with all the money and sparkle the city can muster, you're still alone with your body and your choices. By the time the maid knocks, you've managed to compose yourself. You put on your jacket, tie your shoes with trembling hands, and give the bed one last glance. The sheets are ruined. You leave a tip on the dresser, a silent apology to the next lost soul who thinks silk will save them. And as you walk out into the bright, indifferent morning, you understand a hard truth. It doesn't matter where you sleep in Paris. The city doesn't care. When the party stops, the real work begins. And it's always done alone. You like to tell yourself that heroin sharpens your creativity, but the only thing you've written in a week is a grocery list and a poem about losing your shoes in the Seine. Turns out, inspiration and self-destruction are a messy mix. The myth is seductive. Tortured genius, ink-stained fingers, masterpieces dashed off in a fever dream, all fueled by the white heat of chemical inspiration. Paris is full of legends, painters who see colors no one else can, writers who fill notebooks in a single night, musicians who improvise with the manic energy of men possessed. You want to believe you're one of them. After all, you came to Paris to create, didn't you? To write the novel that will finally make sense of your life, or at least pay the rent for another month. But reality, as usual, is a little less cinematic. The first few times you use, maybe you do feel something shift. Words come easier. Music sounds sweeter. The city lights blur into something almost beautiful. You're not weighed down by the old anxieties, the blank page, the judgment of strangers, the gnawing sense that you're a fraud and everyone knows it. The drugs silence the inner critic. For a while, you mistake that silence for clarity, for creative freedom. It doesn't last. The blank page is patient. It waits for you to come back down. And when you do, the words don't flow like they promised. The ideas are there, somewhere, but they're fuzzy, slippery, like trying to remember a dream you had weeks ago. You find yourself starting stories and never finishing, sketching outlines and then losing interest. Each time you try to focus, your thoughts scatter, running in 10 different directions at once. None of them interesting, none of them leading to the next page. There's always a voice in your head, maybe Gertrude Stein's, maybe your mother's, reminding you that Hemingway wrote best when he was sober, that Picasso worked from sunrise. That genius is built on discipline, not daydreams. But that's a difficult truth to face at 2 a.m, when you're alone in a drafty room hoping that this time, just this once, a little white powder will make you brilliant. Your artist friends tell themselves the same lies. In the cafés, the conversation drifts between philosophy and pharmacology. Did Baudelaire need opium to write Les Fleurs du Mal? Was Van Gogh's vision sharpened by absinthe, or just a symptom of something deeper? Around the table, everyone nods, reassured by the myth that genius comes with a price, that real art is forged in suffering and intoxication. The truth is less glamorous. More often than not, it's forged in the slow, boring hours spent working when you least want to. Let's talk about the work. Half-finished canvases stack up against the walls, notebooks fill with fragmentary poems, and every once in a while you manage a line or two that actually means something. The rest of the time is spent chasing the next idea, or the next fix, or just the next distraction. You lose whole days to the fog, the high, the crash, the endless search for inspiration that never quite arrives. You convince yourself this is just part of the process, but deep down, you know, the only thing you're producing reliably is excuses. Then there's the performance. In Paris, you're expected to act the part, brooding at the bar, cigarette dangling, dropping cryptic remarks about suffering for your art. Everyone's trying to out-bohemian everyone else to look more lost, more haunted, more inspired. But you know the difference between pretending and the real thing. The real thing is messy. The real thing is nights spent staring at the ceiling, too anxious to sleep, too wired to write. The real thing is realizing that most of your so-called inspiration is just procrastination in a fancier outfit. Eventually, you accept the truth. The drugs might make you forget your worries for a little while, but they don't make you a genius. They don't finish the novel, or paint the picture, or compose the song. That work, the real work, is still waiting for you, quiet and stubborn as ever. So you set down the pen, take a breath, and try to remember why you started. Because genius, it turns out, is less about inspiration and more about persistence. And persistence is the one thing you can't fake, not in Paris, not anywhere, not even with the help of a little white lie. The heroin in your pocket took a stranger's suitcase through Marseille, a bribe at the border, and a quick dip in the canal to avoid customs. If only getting a visa to stay in Paris was half as easy. Every packet in Paris has its own twisted odyssey. It's the city's worst-kept secret, behind every beautiful disaster at a jazz club or a Montmartre garret. There's a supply chain as unpredictable and tangled as a poet's love life. Before heroin ever makes its way into a Parisian vein, it's already dodged more close calls than a novelist avoiding their editor. Let's start at the beginning. The Golden Crescent or the Golden Triangle, somewhere far away, a world of poppy fields and long shadows. The powder begins its journey in the hands of someone desperate enough, or clever enough, to see an opportunity in a handful of dust. It's pressed, packed, and hidden in the folds of luggage, destined for France's sunniest ports, the Mediterranean gateways like Marseille, where smuggling is as old as the sea air. Marseille itself is an ecosystem of movement and mischief. Fishermen's boats drift by with nothing but nets on display, but down in the hull, there's always something extra, a small wax-sealed package slipped beneath the catch of the day, or tucked deep inside crates of olives bound for Paris. The docks are crowded, the authorities are bored, and the right handshake or a handful of francs can make a lot of inconvenient paperwork disappear. If the direct approach won't work, there's always the creative route. A suitcase handed off to a stranger, a dash through the chaos of customs, a nervous courier who'd rather not know what's in the false bottom of his violin case. Sometimes the packet takes a literal swim, a quick dunk in the canal to throw off the dogs, or a midnight ride hidden in a sack of laundry on the back of a bicycle. Paris might be glamorous, but the road in is always muddy. When the product finally arrives in the city, it passes through more hands than a cabaret ticket on New Year's Eve. Dealers and couriers form a chain, each link bound by necessity and a deep mistrust of everyone else. The handoff is an art, never in the same place twice, never with the same cover story. Maybe it's a bouquet of flowers exchanged in the park, or a book passed over a cafe table. If someone lingers too long, if a face seems too familiar, everyone scatters. In this game, Paranoia isn't a flaw, it's survival. And then there are the bribes, the little gifts that grease the gears of the city. A few francs slipped to a bored customs official, a bottle of fine brandy for the port inspector, a quiet warning to the local gendarmes who know better than to look too closely at certain packages. The rules are unspoken, but everyone knows them. Don't get greedy, don't ask questions, don't draw attention. It's a business, but it's also a balancing act. One careless move, and the whole supply chain tumbles down like a stack of unpaid bills. All of this, just so a single packet can find its way to your jacket pocket, ready for a night of bad decisions in a smoky club. You might marvel at the ingenuity, the audacity, the sheer nerve of it all, until you remember that for every packet that arrives, there are a dozen more lost along the way. Intercepted by customs, stolen by rivals, or simply vanished into the labyrinthine guts of the city. But Paris is forgiving to those who keep the goods moving. The dealers trade stories like currency. The time someone stashed the powder in a bishop's hat, or smuggled it inside a baguette, or bribed a border guard with tickets to the Folies Bergère. The truth is always a little hazy, but everyone agrees. If you want something badly enough in Paris, it'll find a way to reach you. So next time you tuck that little packet away, spare a thought for its journey. It crossed borders and canals, bribes and betrayals, all to land in your trembling hand. Getting your name on the lease in Paris is hard, but smuggling stories, well, that's an art as old as the city itself. Doctors in 1920s Paris offer all kinds of advice, most of it terrible. From radium toothpaste to morphine lozenges, the only real cure anyone believes in is a good long nap. You wake up with the kind of headache that feels like a warning from a higher power. So, naturally, you seek out a professional. The French medical system is a marvel. If by marvel you mean a revolving door of dubious experts peddling remedies that range from the mildly ineffective to the outright radioactive. Need to brighten your smile? Try a dab of radium toothpaste. Feeling sluggish? Have a few drops of cocaine wine. Wondering why you feel worse the next morning? That's tomorrow's problem. The waiting room is filled with people just like you, all in search of something that will make the mornings easier, the nights shorter, and the pain somewhere in the middle. The walls are covered with advertisements, pills for nervousness, tonics for fatigue, elixirs for love. Each promises a miracle. Each, you suspect, delivers mostly gas. The doctor's office is a strange theater. You sit across from a man with a mustache, so impressive you wonder if he's compensating for the state of his medical degree. He listens to your complaints with the glazed patience of a man who's heard everything and believed nothing. His advice comes in waves. Have you tried hot baths, cold baths, brisk walks in the Bois de Boulogne, or simply moving to the countryside and giving up ambition? He writes out a prescription with a flourish. You peer at the paper. Laudanum, again. Maybe a sprinkle of strychnine for your nerves. You nod solemnly, like you haven't been taking the same medicine for weeks. Pharmacies in Paris are candy shops for the chemically curious. Behind the counter, apothecaries stand like gatekeepers to a parallel universe, dispensing little glass bottles with labels written in looping script. Some of it is medicine, some of it is hope. Most of it is just numbness, measured out by the teaspoon or the dropper. You watch as a socialite in pearls buys a bottle of invigorating tonic, while a tired artist whispers a code word and walks away with something a little stronger. Let's talk about the so-called miracle cures. Got insomnia? There's a syrup for that, guaranteed to knock you out cold, or keep you awake until dawn, depending on your luck. Suffering from anxiety? Try these violet lozenges, generously laced with morphine. Back pain? There's a rub for that, equal parts menthol and empty promises. At the cutting edge, you can find electrotherapy, where a doctor will hook you up to a battery and insist you'll feel like a new man once the tingling stops. The real miracle, of course, is that anyone survives this chemical gauntlet. Parisian medicine in the 20s is as much about faith as science. If your doctor's remedy doesn't work, there's always the advice of a neighbor, the wisdom of a bartender, or a newspaper ad for a medicinal wine with an ingredients list that reads like the periodic table. Nobody quite knows what they're taking, but everyone is sure it's better than nothing. But here's the thing about numbness. It's never quite enough. There's always a point where the miracle cure wears off and you're left with the same worries, the same aches, the same longing for quiet. The medicines only buy you time. If you're lucky, they buy you sleep. If you're unlucky, they buy you a whole new set of problems, shakes, sweats, dreams that feel too real. The cycle repeats. Doctor, pharmacy, cafe, bed, and back again. In the end, you learn to appreciate the simplest cure of all, a good, long nap. Not the medicated kind, but the genuine article, a few hours of peace, no jazz, no appointments, just the soft murmur of Paris outside your window and the blessed silence in your mind. For all its science and spectacle, Parisian medicine in the 1920s is just a complicated way of admitting what everyone already knows. The city can't heal you. At best, it gives you a few ways to forget, and sometimes that's enough to get you through another day. The city's richest party in gilded ballrooms, but even the elite can't resist a taste of forbidden powder. The difference? Their overdoses make the morning papers. It's the kind of irony that Paris practically invented. Outside, the poor and desperate huddle in cramped garrets and freezing boarding houses, chasing a few francs and a little peace of mind. Inside, beneath chandeliers the size of small cars, the city's wealthiest throw parties so lavish that even the furniture is drunk by sunrise. Silver platters overflow with delicacies, champagne fountains gurgle like tiny rivers, and the jazz band plays long after everyone has forgotten the reason for the party in the first place. You don't get invited to these soirees unless you know someone, or unless you're entertaining enough to distract the hostess from her fourth martini. The guest list is a who's who of Parisian aristocracy. Old money, new money, diplomats, and a smattering of faded royalty trying not to look nervous about their dwindling fortunes. Everyone wears their finest, dresses hand-sewn by couturiers, tuxedos pressed to within an inch of their lives. Even the help looks like they stepped out of a painting. But here's the thing. Beneath the surface, the rules don't really change. When the laughter gets a little too wild and the music gets a little too fast, there's always a select group that slips away from the main hall. Down winding corridors and behind locked doors, the real party happens. A quieter, smokier affair, where the champagne is swapped for something a little stronger and the conversation gets both more honest and more dangerous. The forbidden powder is the great social equalizer. No one talks about it in daylight, but everyone knows who has the best supplier. You can spot them by the little signs, the slightly dilated pupils, the glassy stares, the sudden urge to discuss philosophy at 3 a.m. But in high society, everything is cloaked in plausible deniability. No one is an addict. They're just eccentric. No one is desperate. They're simply living for the moment. It's easier to hide the truth when your bathroom is bigger than most apartments. Occasionally, the mask slips. There's the Baron's son, dancing a little too energetically, before vanishing for half an hour and returning with a shirt untucked and an inexplicable nosebleed. Or the heiress, who's usually the life of the party, now curled up in a corner, eyes fluttering as she drifts somewhere far away. The staff know better than to ask questions, and the other guests simply look away. In Paris, discretion is a more valuable currency than gold. Of course, when things go wrong, they go wrong with all the drama of a 3-act play. The city wakes up to lurid headlines. Another tragedy in a penthouse suite. Another promising life cut short by the temptations of modernity. The funerals are grand. The eulogies flow. And everyone swears to be more careful, at least until the next invitation arrives. The poor fade away in silence. The rich make the gossip columns. Let's not pretend for a moment that the glamour makes it safer. If anything, it makes it more dangerous. Money buys silence, but it doesn't buy immunity. The powder circulates freely behind velvet curtains, passed from hand to jeweled hand, each person certain they'll be the exception. It's just for fun, they say, just to take the edge off. The edge, of course, never dulls. It just moves a little further out of reach, until one night the edge disappears entirely. And yet, the parties continue. The city's finest spin and swirl through the night, driven by a hunger they'll never admit. Outside, the city struggles and stumbles, But in the ballrooms of Paris, the high and mighty chase oblivion with as much desperation as anyone on the street. The music plays on, the lights burn late, and somewhere between the glamour and the gutter, everyone hopes they won't be the next morning's headline. Because if Paris has a real dirty secret, it's this: when the party ends, nobody is immune. The difference is only who gets remembered and who gets forgotten. You thought starving for your art was a figure of speech, but apparently your landlord disagrees. The only thing more overdue than your rent is your latest novel. There's nothing like the arrival of the first of the month to cut through whatever haze you've managed to build up. You could be floating gently on the clouds of creative inspiration, or something less legal, but the sound of your landlord's boots on the staircase is more sobering than a bucket of cold water to the face. Paris might be the city of lights, but it's also the city of overdue notices, unpaid bills, and just one more week, I promise. Rent day always comes as a shock, like winter arriving in June. You scramble for coins under sofa cushions, check every pocket, and wonder if the cafe will finally notice that the complimentary sugar packets have been mysteriously disappearing. The math never quite works out. Even your grandest literary ambitions, your future bestsellers, your unfinished symphonies, don't impress the building manager, who is remarkably immune to poetry and not at all interested in being paid in rough drafts. Let's talk about priorities. When you only have enough francs for either a day's supply of heroin or another week in your garret, every decision feels like a small crisis. You tell yourself you'll make it work. You'll finish a short story, you'll sell a sketch to a drunk tourist, you'll maybe pawn the good shoes or finally return the neighbor's typewriter you borrowed. But the city isn't generous, and neither is your addiction. The more you need, the less you have. You develop a new kind of creativity, the kind that has nothing to do with art and everything to do with survival. Negotiation becomes an art form. Madame, I can pay you in 3 days, I swear. My publisher is simply slow. Monsieur, I'm working on a translation for a famous American. The check is in the post. You get good at spinning tales, mostly because your real life is too complicated to explain. Sometimes you even convince yourself. Meanwhile, the garret closes in. The walls seem smaller, the drafts colder. Your meager possessions are always at risk. Books, a chipped mug, that one good blanket, all potentially destined for the pawn shop if things get desperate enough. You imagine the landlord auctioning off your copy of Baudelaire, and the indignity stings almost as much as the fear of sleeping on the street. Some of your friends manage to skate by on luck and charm, bouncing from one friend's couch to another's, always one step ahead of the rent collector. Others aren't so lucky. You see them in the cafés and parks, hollow-eyed and sharp-shouldered, clinging to the city's edges. Addiction has no patience for financial hardship. It devours what little money you have, then comes for your dignity, your friendships, and finally your roof. There's a peculiar solidarity among the broke and addicted. You pool coins for bread, split cigarettes, swap stories of close calls and miraculous escapes. You learn to be generous with what little you have, because tomorrow it could be you begging for a warm meal or a place to crash. In these moments, you realize that survival in Paris is a communal effort. Nobody makes it alone, and nobody expects to. Still, every month the cycle repeats. You dodge the landlord, promise to pay next week, pawn a coat, skip a meal, write another desperate letter to home. You fantasize about a windfall, a patron, a sudden sale, an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative you've never met. But most days, it's just you and the calendar, locked in a grim waltz. At the end of it all, when the dust settles and you're still standing in your tiny room, you count your blessings. Another day indoors, another night in a city that both forgives and forgets. You tell yourself it's worth it for the art, for the freedom, for the hope that next month will be different. Because if Paris teaches you anything, it's that reality has a way of showing up on your doorstep, and it always collects what it's owed. From garlic soup to questionable herbal teas, everyone in Paris claims to have a cure for the shakes. Most of them involve lying down and regretting your life choices in French. Paris may be the city of lights, but by mid-morning, When the last embers of your party have long gone cold, it's mostly a city of hangovers, shivers, and desperate culinary experiments. You stumble out of bed feeling like you've been trampled by a herd of philosophical goats and immediately begin the search for something, anything, that might coax your body back toward equilibrium. The options are as diverse as the neighborhoods themselves, ranging from ancient peasant remedies to the sort of new age elixirs that taste like punishment. Let's start with the garlic soup. Supposedly invented by monks, beloved by poets, and sworn by grandmothers from Montmartre to Montparnasse, it's equal parts comfort food and culinary dare. You dice up an alarming quantity of garlic, boil it with stale bread, water, and a pinch of salt, and hope your neighbors aren't too attached to their sense of smell. Legend says it'll sweat out the poison. Reality says it'll clear out your sinuses, your friends, and possibly any demons left over from last night. If garlic doesn't cut it, there's always the Parisian love affair with dubious teas. Chamomile for calm, mint for headaches, valerian for sleep. There's a tea for every malady, each one prescribed with the seriousness of a doctor and the confidence of someone who's never actually tried their own medicine. You sit in a smoky cafe, sipping something that tastes vaguely medicinal, and pretend you're getting better. If nothing else, it gives you an excuse to sit still and stare blankly at the morning crowd. But herbal teas aren't the only miracle cures in town. Some swear by hot milk with honey, others by the infamous bouillon cube in hot water method, an approach that is somehow both salty and disappointing, much like most artistic relationships. For the brave, there's always the local pharmacist, who's happy to sell you a restorative tonic that might contain anything from sugar and vinegar to traces of morphine, or, if you're especially lucky, just enough codeine to buy you a nap. Every arrondissement has its own signature fix. The working class in Belleville swears by strong black coffee and a cigarette. The artists in Montparnasse believe in the restorative power of a raw egg cracked into cognac. No, really. In Saint-Germain, it's all about an early morning stroll along the Seine, letting the cold wind slap some sense into you. It never works, but it does give you time to rehearse your apology to your editor, your friends, or your liver. What these cures all share is the underlying belief that misery loves company. You're never alone in your suffering. Someone is always at the next table, hunched over the same bowl of soup or cup of tea, giving you a look that says, "I know, mon ami. I was you yesterday." There's a kind of solidarity in it, the shared acknowledgement that life in Paris is lived at a pace too fast for the body to keep up with. Of course, most cures are really just placeholders, ways to wait out the worst of the shakes and the regrets until you can stand upright again. The French are masters of pretending to feel better before they actually do. You find a warm spot in a sunbeam, pile on your thickest blanket, and try to sleep off the disaster. When in doubt, the ultimate Parisian remedy is denial. Act normal, shrug elegantly, and say it was all worth it for the story. By the time the sun is overhead and the city's energy returns, you've convinced yourself you might survive after all. Maybe tonight you'll pace yourself. Maybe you'll drink water between cocktails. Maybe you'll avoid the mysterious brown bottle at the end of the bar. Or maybe you'll just accept that Parisian life is an endless cycle of indulgence, regret, and recovery. And if you're lucky, the next time you wake up with the shakes, you'll have just enough garlic left for one more bowl of soup, and the hope that, by tomorrow, your mistakes will taste a little sweeter. Sharing a flat with literary greats means someone is always borrowing your typewriter, your last franc, and occasionally your secret stash. Sometimes, the real addiction is to misery itself. The legends make it sound romantic. Montparnasse, 1920s, an attic buzzing with genius and cigarette smoke, the air thick with the scent of fresh ink, spilled wine and ambition. Hemingway in one corner, grumbling over syntax. Fitzgerald laughing in the kitchen, balancing a glass of vermouth and a stack of overdue rent notices. You, curled up on the mattress, wondering how you ended up with the only group of artists in Paris who treat personal property as a vague suggestion. Your morning starts inevitably with the noise of someone else's hangover. The clatter of coffee cups, the curses, as Hemingway discovers, again that you've used his best pen for a shopping list. The last of the bread has vanished, probably transformed into an impromptu meal by a poet with more hunger than inspiration. Your last franc, meant for laundry or maybe a pack of cigarettes, now lives in a stranger's pocket, traded for 2 minutes of poetry or a promise to pay you back when the book sells. You stopped believing in repayment, the same time you stopped believing in moderation. Typewriters are sacred objects in this house, but that never stops anyone from relocating them. You'll find yours on the windowsill, missing the letter E, or sometimes in the hallway, balancing a wobbly table leg. Every draft is a collaborative effort, whether you want it or not. Pages disappear, reappear, sometimes edited in someone else's hand. The phrase artistic input begins to sound like a threat. Inspiration is contagious, but so is creative theft. As for your secret stash, well, it's an open secret. Writers have a preternatural sense for sniffing out anything that might dull the ache of failure or spark a new idea. Laudanum vanishes from the medicine cabinet. Heroin, meant to last you through the weekend, is gone after one particularly wild night when Fitzgerald insisted it would make the next chapter sing. It didn't. But it did inspire 3 pages of illegible scrawl and a week's worth of headaches. Living with literary legends means your life is a continuous negotiation. For food, for space, for silence, for privacy. Your bed is never your own, sometimes claimed by a visiting playwright, sometimes by Hemingway's boots. The boundaries blur, just like the days. You lose track of what's yours, what's borrowed, what's merely passing through on its way to another poet's pockets. Resentment simmers, but so does camaraderie. Everyone's poor, everyone's tired, everyone's a genius when the right person is listening. Then there's the matter of misery. Artists collect sorrow the way Parisians collect ticket stubs, every disappointment filed away for future reference, every heartbreak milked for metaphor. It's easy to get addicted, not just to the substances, but to the drama, the endless cycle of creation and destruction. You tell yourself you're suffering for your art, but some days you wonder if the suffering is the art. The highs are higher when everyone's watching. The lows are lower when the wine runs out and the bills pile up. The house is alive with stories, none of them quite true. Hemingway claims his hangovers make him a better writer. Fitzgerald swears by insomnia. You cling to the hope that tomorrow will bring a breakthrough, a finished chapter, a little money, maybe an unbroken night's sleep. For now, you make do. Half a cup of coffee, half a cigarette, half a poem scrawled in the margin of someone else's manuscript. Outside, Paris hums on, indifferent to your genius and your hangover alike. Inside, you and your flatmates pass the days trading barbs and bread, clinging to the myth that great art demands great suffering. Sometimes, it even feels true. But most of the time, you're just surviving, one borrowed line at a time, in the shadow of legends who, it turns out, are just as hungry, just as lost, and just as desperate for another drop as you. The sun always rises, but it brings with it a pounding headache, a suspicious bite mark, and a lingering sense that you've accidentally joined a cult. In Paris, the morning after isn't just a time of day. It's a full-blown existential crisis with a side of stale croissant. You wake up tangled in sheets that probably belong to someone else, clutching a shoe that definitely isn't yours. The ceiling spins gently, as if offering a critique of your life choices. Somewhere, a jazz record plays on repeat, stuck between 2 notes, echoing your own inability to move forward. You grope around for water and find an empty wine bottle, a wilted flower, and a book of matches from a bar you don't remember entering. Welcome to the morning after. Let's talk about the stench. Gaulia's cigarettes have a smell that lingers on your hair, your breath, your soul. The air in your room is thick with it, along with the stale perfume of last night's regrets. You cough, and the sound startles a stray cat, who stares at you as if to say, "You again?" There's no dignity in a Parisian hangover. Just sweat, secondhand smoke, and the creeping realization that whatever promises you made to yourself last night, never again, just one more, I'll write tomorrow, are as empty as the bottle rolling under the bed. The first challenge, reconstructing your sins. You have a vague recollection of dancing with a stranger, possibly at a party, possibly in the street. There was a heated debate about art, or maybe politics, or maybe which bakery has the best baguette. Someone bit you, but in the spirit of avant-garde friendship or something darker, you're not sure. You check your pockets. There's a napkin with a poem scrawled on it, a receipt for 6 espressos, and a feather boa. None of these belong to you. But now, neither does your sense of certainty. Regret is the city's favorite breakfast. You chew on it alongside a crust of bread, nursing a mug of black coffee, and pretending the world isn't spinning quite so fast. Your head throbs with every heartbeat, and the light sneaking through the window feels like punishment. You consider the possibility that you've joined a cult. How else to explain the group of people singing Edith Piaf in your living room at 4 a.m., or the elaborate handshake someone taught you before disappearing into the night? The rituals of recovery are as French as the hangover itself. You splash cold water on your face, fumble with your hair, and light another cigarette in a futile attempt to clear the air. You try to read, but the words swim. You try to write, but your hands shake. The best you can do is shuffle to the nearest cafe, where the waiters have seen it all before and offer no judgment, just strong coffee and a seat by the window, so you can watch the rest of the city pretending to be functional. You trade stories with whoever you find, your roommate, your neighbor, the barista who remembers your name but not your face. Did you see the moon last night? Who won the argument about Proust? Are you missing a shoe? There's laughter, because Paris is nothing if not a place to laugh at your own disasters. There's advice too, bad advice, usually, but sincere. Try tomato juice, or a walk along the Seine, or another glass of wine. Never apologize. And then, slowly, the city pulls you back into its rhythm. The headache fades, the regrets mellow, and the stench of Gauloises becomes just another Parisian accessory. You find your other shoe in the fridge, write a new poem on a napkin, and promise yourself to do better tonight, or at least to remember more. Because in Paris, the morning after isn't a punishment, it's a reset. A chance to try again, to make new mistakes, to collect more stories you'll only half remember and never fully regret. The sun always rises, the jazz always plays, and you, despite everything, are still here to see what trouble comes next. There are rules in the Paris underworld, even if nobody writes them down. Trust is rare, payment is in cash, and loyalty is strictly optional. You hear whispers about the code from your first night in the city. Some say it's an honor system, others say it's just a convenient myth. Either way, everyone knows what happens to people who break it. In the world beneath Paris's glittering surface, the world of alleyway deals, code words, and nervous glances, there's no safety net. You learn quickly that friendship is just another way to say business partner, for now. Deals are conducted in shadows, away from the curious eyes of police and gossipy neighbors. There's a choreography to it, quick nods, subtle handshakes, the passing of a tiny packet or folded banknote. Payment is always in cash, and no one ever makes change. You carry just enough for what you need and not a franc more. Flash too much money, and you might as well hang a sign around your neck that says, "Rob me, please." Come up short, and the conversation ends. The best you can hope for is a sigh and a warning. The worst? Well, Paris has a lot of dark corners. Trust, in this world, is earned drop by drop and lost in a single mistake. Maybe you buy a bad batch, too weak, too strong, laced with something extra. Maybe you talk too much, or too loudly, or to the wrong person. Maybe you disappear when it's your turn to pay up. The next time you show your face, the doors are closed, the dealers have melted away, and you're left on the outside, peering in through the fog. Loyalty is rare, but not unheard of. The best dealers, best being a relative term, have a roster of regulars. There's a kind of mutual understanding. You don't cause trouble, they don't cause trouble. If the police come sniffing, everyone's tight-lipped. You know which dealers will sell you something safe, which ones will water down the goods, and which ones will rob you as soon as you turn your back. Sometimes, you even develop a rapport, an exchange of jokes, a shared cigarette, a grudging respect for each other's nerve. But the code is flexible. Loyalty lasts as long as it's convenient. One night, your favorite supplier slips you a little extra because you look like hell. The next week, the same dealer won't even make eye contact, caught up in a turf war or spooked by rumors of a new police crackdown. If someone betrays you, sells your name to the authorities, steals from your stash, spreads lies about your reliability, there's no recourse but to walk away. Retaliation is dangerous. So is forgiveness. Everyone watches everyone else. The underworld is a small place, despite the city's size. Stories travel quickly. Who's in debt? Who's making moves? Who's vanished without a trace? Paranoia isn't a flaw. It's a prerequisite for survival. You learn to speak in half-truths, to never reveal more than you have to. Even with people you trust, you keep a secret or two in your back pocket, just in case. There's also the question of favors. Sometimes a dealer does you a solid, fronts you a packet when you're broke, gives you a tip about a police raid, hides you in a cellar when things get rough. You remember these moments, tuck them away, but you know the price will come due. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon enough. In this economy, nothing is ever truly free. And then there are the betrayals, spectacular, inevitable. As much a part of Paris as the Eiffel Tower or bad poetry. Someone rats, someone runs, someone suddenly has more money than sense. The code doesn't protect you from heartbreak, but it does keep you sharp. In the end, the only rule you can count on is this: don't trust anyone completely, not even yourself. The city may change, the faces may blur, but the underworld code is eternal, written in nervous glances, coded language, and the silent, heavy promise that what happens in the dark rarely stays hidden for long. So you play by the rules, or at least pretend to, and hope that tonight, loyalty lasts just long enough to get you what you need, and that betrayal is a problem for another day. In Paris, it's the only way to survive. Some people try to quit. Some succeed. Most just move to Berlin and write cryptic postcards. If you want to get clean, you'll need strong coffee, stronger friends, and an even stronger will to live. It always starts with a promise. Quiet, determined, whispered to your own reflection at 3 a.m. while Paris sleeps and the city's temptations swirl just outside your window. You promise yourself that this is the day you'll turn it around, the day you'll say no and really mean it. You stare into the cracked mirror, see the circles under your eyes, and swear off powder, parties, and every questionable remedy your doctor ever scribbled in bad handwriting. The next morning, reality hits like a runaway tram. You wake up to the usual symphony of aches and cravings, only now there's a fresh layer of dread. The first test, the ritual of coffee. You make it as black and bitter as possible, strong enough to peel paint, and maybe, just maybe, keep your hands from shaking. Paris runs on caffeine and hope, and you're running low on both. You pour yourself a cup and let the steam hit your face, praying that today the coffee is enough to fill the hole inside your chest. The city doesn't make quitting easy. You pass 3 pharmacies on the way to the market, each one with a different apothecary who knows someone. You see the old crew outside the jazz club, laughing, their problems temporarily suspended in a cloud of smoke. There's always an invitation, a temptation, a promise that tonight will be different. Just a drink, just a taste, just to take the edge off. You have to learn the art of saying no, which is much harder than saying not tonight, and infinitely harder than maybe just a little. If you're lucky, you find your tribe. The people who've been there, who recognize the look in your eyes, who know what it feels like to count the hours, the minutes, the seconds. They become your lifeline, your excuse to get out of bed when the fog is thickest. Together, you develop rituals, endless walks by the river, cold lemon water at dawn, complicated inside jokes about the taste of chamomile. You learn to mark time not by parties or pills, but by tiny victories. A week clean, a day without cravings, a single night's sleep uninterrupted by dreams of running. Of course, there are setbacks. Relapse is as Parisian as croissants. The city is full of slippery places. Old haunts, old friends, that one song on the radio that makes your heart race for all the wrong reasons. Some days, you stumble. Some days, you fall. But you pick yourself up again, with the help of a friend or a barista who always makes your coffee just the way you like it. No questions asked. For some, quitting becomes a full-time job. Meetings in drafty church basements. Journals filled with shaky affirmations and doodles of escape routes. You become a connoisseur of herbal teas, a collector of quiet cafés, where the only drug on offer is sugar. You spend hours practicing self-compassion in front of the mirror, repeating that you are not your worst day, that Paris forgives, that you can too. Others take the more dramatic route. They leave. Berlin calls, with its promise of reinvention and anonymity. Friends receive cryptic postcards, found a new cafe, still searching for myself, but nobody is ever really sure if Berlin is the answer, or just a different kind of running away. But for those who stay, who grit their teeth and dig in their heels, recovery is possible, if not glamorous, at least real. You measure your progress in tiny increments. The first laugh that isn't forced. The first time you wake up and feel not good, but okay. You start to remember what it feels like to be bored and realize boredom is a luxury. Eventually, you find a new kind of Parisian romance, a life where the city's beauty isn't dulled by fog, where friendships are real and mornings aren't just preludes to regret. It's not easy, it's not perfect, but it's yours. And for the first time in a long time, you look out at the city lights and feel, just for a moment, that you might be enough. Sometimes you trade heroin for opium, just to shake things up. The velvet pillows and incense might fool you into thinking this is glamorous, right up until you wake up on the floor, missing a shoe. It's easy to romanticize opium dens if you've only ever seen them in paintings or novels. Dimly lit hideaways filled with mysterious strangers, the air swirling with perfumed smoke and whispered secrets. In Paris, they're tucked away on back streets, often behind the kind of door you'd walk past 100 times without ever noticing. A nondescript entrance, a knowing look exchanged, and suddenly you're inside a whole different world. Here, the chaos of the city disappears beneath layers of brocade and velvet, and everyone moves in slow motion. You hand over your coins and are shown to a pile of extravagant pillows in a corner, already indented by a dozen lost nights. The air is thick with sandalwood and something sharper, burning opium, mingled with sweat and regret. A host or hostess offers a gentle smile, maybe a cup of tea, and someone's always willing to show you the ropes if you look new. The pipe makes its way around the room, and you inhale, slow and steady, feeling the smoke crawl into your bones. At first, it's almost beautiful. The worries that have been eating you alive soften at the edges. The city's noise fades to a gentle hum. People lie draped across each other in strange, peaceful shapes, half-remembered stories drifting in the haze. You watch a dancer trace lazy patterns in the air with her hands. Someone plays a few soft notes on a battered guitar. For a while, you're convinced you've discovered the secret to happiness, velvet and dreams, a weightless peace that could go on forever. But the glamour has limits. The room gets colder as the night goes on, the spell slipping at the edges. You realize, with a pang, that the feeling is borrowed, not earned. The peace is shallow, a quiet that covers up a deeper emptiness. You watch the others more closely now, how their faces flicker between bliss and exhaustion, how the laughter sometimes tips over into quiet weeping. Someone is looking for a friend who wandered off. Someone else is counting coins for their next pipe. When you finally try to leave, your limbs feel both heavy and hollow, as if you've spent hours drifting through your own memories. Standing up is an adventure, your sense of direction long gone, your shoes no longer a matching pair. The elegant fantasy is undone by the reality of cracked tiles, a splintery door, and the rude slap of morning air as you step outside. Opium dreams are sticky things. The next day is always a little grayer, your mind cotton-wrapped and reluctant to return to the pace of real life. You shuffle through Paris in yesterday's clothes, mouth dry, pockets emptier than you remember. The perfume of incense clings to your skin, an invisible badge that marks you as someone who's been to the other side and limped back. Breakfast is a challenge, your stomach isn't ready, your thoughts keep drifting. You promise yourself that next time, you'll be more careful. Next time, you'll just watch. The people who frequent the dens are as varied as the city itself. Students with more hope than sense, failed poets, visiting aristocrats, curious tourists, and the truly lost. You see the same faces again and again, each caught in the delicate balance between relief and ruin. Friendships are struck up in the middle of the night and forgotten by morning. Every so often, someone simply vanishes, moved on, moved away, or just swallowed whole by the city. Still, the allure is undeniable. The dens promise escape, a velvet-lined oblivion where time doesn't matter and worries dissolve in the smoke, but the dreams fade, and the hunger returns, sharp as ever. And there you are, searching for your shoe, your wallet, your dignity, and wondering how many times you can chase a feeling before it stops coming back. In Paris, the dream is always waiting, just around the corner. But waking up is inevitable, and you never know what you'll be missing when you do. Every street in Paris has its share of ghosts, artists, addicts, lovers, and liars. Some disappeared into history. Others are probably still wandering, searching for one last high, one last story, one last chance. Walk down any Parisian boulevard after midnight, and you can feel them. The echo of hurried footsteps on wet cobblestone, the faintest trace of laughter carried on the night air. The sudden chill that comes not from the wind, but from a sense that someone is watching, or maybe remembering. The city never truly empties. By day, the crowds and car horns drown out the past. But by night, Paris belongs to the lost souls, who have nowhere left to go but forward, deeper into the fog, trailing regrets and half-formed dreams behind them. You might see the signs if you know where to look. A flicker in the shadows beneath a bridge, a pale face illuminated by a street lamp, gone when you glance back. The rhythm of a cane tapping out a lonely waltz, a painter's splattered shoes, a faint scent of absinthe from a doorway that no longer leads anywhere. They are everywhere and nowhere, blending in with the living, haunting the city's corners, always just out of reach. Some are legends, the poets who never published, the musicians who played to empty rooms, the lovers who made promises on the banks of the Seine and vanished before the sun rose. Their stories live on, embroidered with each telling. Every bartender in Montmartre claims to have served a drink to a genius who disappeared. Every doorman in the Latin Quarter has seen a famous artist stumbling home, only to vanish into the mist. Parisian ghosts are never just sad. They're romantic, mysterious, larger than life, made for retelling. Others are more ordinary, but no less tragic. The young woman searching for her lost love in every stranger's face. The man who never got clean, shuffling from one clinic to another, always hopeful, always defeated. Friends and neighbors who simply drifted out of touch, their names still whispered at parties. Do you remember? The city is full of missing persons who never make the newspapers, but who are sorely missed by someone, somewhere. For every famous ghost, there are dozens more you'll never hear about. Maybe they haunt the same cafe you sit in now, perched on a stool that always seems to wobble, watching the world move on without them. Maybe you feel their sadness as you walk home after a long night, your own burdens suddenly lighter in comparison. The ghosts of Paris don't want revenge or redemption. They just want to be remembered, even if only as a cautionary tale. Nighttime brings them closest. You wander the narrow alleys and feel a shiver run up your spine as you catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a darkened window, uncertain whether you're the ghost or the guest. Sometimes the border between worlds grows thin, a song, a scent, a story, and you almost believe you could reach out and touch them, these vanished souls who still long for something they can't name. The city feeds on these stories. Paris is built on layers of loss and longing, every building a mausoleum to someone's unfinished business. In some ways, it's a comfort. You're never truly alone here, not with so many restless spirits for company. Their mistakes become warnings. Their joys become hopes you carry into your own tomorrow. You find yourself talking to them in quiet moments, offering a silent toast with your midnight coffee, or pausing before you cross a deserted street. just in case someone needs to pass by. And maybe, if you listen closely, you'll hear them whispering advice. Don't make the same mistakes. Tell your story while you still can. Find your joy, hold on to it, and don't wait until it's too late. Because every night, Paris is full of ghosts, and every morning, the living get one more chance to avoid becoming one. For now, you step carefully through the city's haunted beauty, grateful for the warnings and determined not to disappear. Eventually, everyone has to wake up. The jazz club closes, the dealer moves on, and you're left with nothing but memories, stories, and a lingering sense of longing. For what? You're not sure. Morning in Paris is rarely gentle, especially after a night spent chasing the city's most elusive comforts. The soft golden light that makes postcards famous now seems almost accusatory as it slips between faded curtains. You blink awake in a room that was once filled with laughter, music, and the sweet smoke of forgetfulness, now silent except for the distant echo of your own heartbeat. Somewhere, someone is sweeping up broken glass and unspoken promises from the floor of a club that seemed, just hours ago, like the center of the universe. Your first thought is always the same. What happens now? What do you do when the party's over and all the beautiful, impossible people have gone? The bed is empty, your pockets are lighter, and the ache behind your eyes suggests you weren't as careful as you thought. The stories you collected last night already feel distant, fuzzy around the edges, like dreams slipping away in the first seconds after waking. Maybe you remember a conversation about art, a hand in yours, a shared secret in a shadowy corner, or maybe you just remember the feeling of belonging, however fleeting it was. You sit at the edge of the bed, feet cold on bare floorboards, and listen to the city waking up. Paris is an early riser, no matter how late its artists and addicts stayed up the night before. Outside, bread is being delivered, dogs are barking, the city's energy rebuilding itself from the ground up. For a moment, you envy the simplicity of a baker's morning, the routine of flour and fire, and the certainty of tomorrow's dough. Your own future feels more uncertain than ever, scattered among the cigarette butts and half-finished poems on the windowsill. You wander the room, gathering the remnants of the night, an empty glass, a matchbook with an unfamiliar phone number, a single glove with no partner. You find yourself sifting through memories like souvenirs, a scrap of melody caught on the wind, the taste of someone's lipstick, the sharp thrill of getting away with something you shouldn't have done. There's a kind of sweetness in this exhaustion, a gentleness to the letdown that is almost reassuring. The dream is over, but at least you got to live it. There's always a moment when you ask yourself if it was worth it, the lost hours, the empty wallet, the emotional hangover that lingers long after the physical one fades. In Paris, the answer is always a complicated maybe. You wouldn't trade the night for anything, but you know you can't live in it forever. The city's promise is both seductive and cruel. You can taste everything, but you can't keep it. Joy is fleeting, and so is escape. You open the window, let in a gust of cool air, and watch as Paris shakes off the remnants of night. The world is moving on, whether you're ready or not. Somewhere, a neighbor is already yelling about the price of milk, a newspaper vendor is setting up shop, and the street below is alive with a new crop of dreamers, hustlers, and hopeful fools. You wonder how many of them will find what they're looking for tonight, and how many will wake up tomorrow asking the same questions you are. Eventually, you pull yourself together, wash your face, brush the smoke out of your hair. You step out onto the street, blending into the crowd, one more anonymous story among millions. The city doesn't remember your triumphs or your disasters, only that you keep returning, again and again, hungry for meaning, for comfort, for something that feels like home. Because that's the secret of Paris. Nobody gets to stay in the dream forever. Sooner or later, you have to wake up. But if you're lucky, you get to carry a piece of the night with you, a melody, a kindness, a sliver of hope into the bright, bustling day. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. If there's one thing nobody tells you about heroin chic, it's that spoons are always missing. Your neighbor borrows them, the jazz singer melts them, and somehow you're always left stirring your coffee with the handle of a hairbrush. In Paris, the true currency isn't francs, It's a clean, slightly bent teaspoon. It sounds like a joke until you realize you haven't seen a real spoon in your garret for weeks. Forks are easy to come by. Nobody wants them. Knives are frankly intimidating in the hands of most artists. But spoons? Spoons are gold. You start with a drawer full. Souvenirs from cafés, gifts from old lovers. One that still bears the initials of a faded hotel. By the end of the month, all that's left is a single, sad butter knife and a deep sense of betrayal. The crisis begins innocently enough. One morning you stumble into the kitchen, clutching your battered coffee pot, only to discover that every spoon has vanished overnight. You interrogate your flatmates, but they just shrug and gesture at the jazz band that crashed on the floor last night. Maybe they took them for the road, someone offers, as if teaspoons are an essential part of touring equipment. You check the sink, the windowsill, under the bed. Nothing. Even the sugar spoon has absconded, leaving a trail of granules as a farewell. You become suspicious of everyone. The neighbor with the sad eyes and the endless need for just one more favor. The poet who swears she only uses spoons to eat pudding at 3 a.m. The trumpet player who keeps showing up with suspiciously new cutlery, then leaving just before breakfast. Every visitor is a potential thief. Every party, a chance for a spoon to disappear into the Parisian night. Soon, you're improvising. Coffee is stirred with pencils, paintbrushes, or the end of a cigarette holder, if you're feeling particularly bohemian. Soup is sipped straight from the bowl. You try to act unfazed when friends come over. Oh, spoons? No, we're far too modern for spoons. Spoons are passé. In reality, you'd trade your last pack of Gauloises for something with a rounded edge. The black market for spoons becomes a running joke among your circle. Heard about a shipment coming in from Lyon, someone whispers at the club, 3 dozen dessert spoons barely used. There are rumors of a dealer who can get you anything for the right price. Silver, pewter, stainless steel. He's got connections. You imagine a secret meeting in a smoky alley, trading francs for a handful of battered teaspoons, slipping them into your coat like precious contraband. Even the local cafés aren't immune. You start eyeing the cutlery with intent. But the waiters have seen it all before. Don't even think about it, one warns, as he slides your coffee across the counter, spoon safely chained to the saucer. You consider making an offer, but discretion, and your ever-shrinking budget, wins out. Of course, the reason for the shortage isn't exactly a secret. In the world of heroin chic, spoons aren't just for coffee or soup. They're tools of the trade, bent and blackened, sacrificed in the pursuit of numbness. Nobody admits it out loud, but everyone knows. The city's teaspoons live fast, die young, and disappear without a trace, often in the pocket of a friend you'll see at the next party, looking for a light and a little sympathy. Still, you can't help but find the humor in it. Paris has survived revolutions, invasions, and endless waves of new art movements, but it might finally be brought to its knees by a shortage of spoons. You start dreaming of spoons, silver, gleaming, perfectly balanced. You fantasize about walking into a shop and buying a dozen just because you can. But deep down, you know, even if you had a drawer full, they'd be gone by the end of the week. So, you stir your coffee with a hairpin and raise your chipped mug in salute to the city's most underappreciated currency. In Paris, it turns out, survival isn't about talent or ambition. It's about who gets to the last spoon first and who's left holding the empty cup. Some nights, you sit at a chipped cafe table and try to write home. But how do you explain to your mother that you're living in a city where the only thing more common than heartbreak is a dealer's business card? The ink runs, the letters ramble, and you always forget to mention the weather. It starts as an obligation, a weekly ritual, a small token of proof that you're still alive, still trying, still somewhat tethered to the version of yourself that once knew how to spell stability. You smooth out the creased paper, balancing it atop a rickety table that wobbles with every passing streetcar. Around you, the cafe hums, waiters shouting, glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off the smoky walls. The scent of burnt coffee and old dreams fills the air. Somewhere in the corner, a jazz trio plays a song that sounds suspiciously like the one you cried to last week. You address the letter carefully, practicing your best penmanship for the return address, as if neatness can somehow make up for the content. Dear Mama, you begin, and then you pause. How do you describe Paris without breaking her heart, or, worse, making her want to visit? You reach for honesty, but it comes out sideways. Paris is lively. I'm writing a lot. The city is inspiring. Technically true, but the reality is less about inspiration and more about keeping your head above water. You want to tell her about the beauty, the way the Seine sparkles at sunset, the thrill of crossing the Pont Neuf in a rainstorm, the quiet companionship of strangers at a midnight bakery. But what spills out is something else. Life here is unpredictable, which, in code, means you've lost 3 jobs this month, missed your rent twice, and now know 6 different words for hangover in French. There are things you leave out. The friend who vanished. The night you woke up on the wrong side of the river with no memory and no shoes. The way the city sometimes feels like it's swallowing you whole. You don't mention the late-night pharmacy visits, or the jazz club bathrooms, or the endless parade of faces you only remember by their vices. Instead, you sprinkle in a few details that might pass for charm. I had a wonderful croissant this morning. It was stale, but the pigeons were grateful. I met an artist from Berlin. He tried to sell you a painting that looked suspiciously like a spilled wine stain. The ink blots as your hand trembles. You stop to watch the world outside, the couples bickering, the taxi drivers leaning on their horns, the flower seller packing up for the night. Paris is relentless, beautiful and brutal, and you feel yourself somewhere between the two, not quite lost, not quite found. You wonder what your mother would say if she knew the truth. That some days you forget to eat, that you live on borrowed cigarettes and borrowed time, that the city's magic sometimes feels more like a curse than a blessing. Would she beg you to come home? Would she tell you to tough it out? Or would she, in her quiet wisdom, remind you that all great stories have chapters you'd rather not read out loud? At some point, the letter always goes off the rails. You ramble about art, about philosophy, about a street performer who played the violin until his fingers bled. You add a poem half-finished and a doodle of the cafe cat, who is currently judging your life choices from a safe distance. The letter becomes a collage, a patchwork of half-truths, small confessions, and silent apologies. You sign it with love, always love. Fold it carefully, tuck it into an envelope, and add a stamp you can barely afford. You drop it in the mailbox, heart pounding, knowing it will take weeks to reach home, if it ever does. The act of writing is its own kind of lifeline, a fragile thread that connects who you were to who you're trying to become. The next night, you return to the same cafe, the same table, the same impossible hope that maybe, if you just keep writing, things will start to make sense. For now, it's enough to keep sending postcards from the edge, proof that you're still here, still trying, still learning how to say I'm okay in a city that rarely lets you believe it. And so, tonight, as the last jazz note fades and Paris's moon slips behind the rooftops, you can finally let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. You've wandered through smoky clubs, lost your dignity to the city's cobblestones, and survived the wild-eyed highs and hollow lows of a Paris that never really sleeps. Maybe you fell in love with an artist, or with the idea of being one. Maybe you dodged the police, the pharmacist, or just a particularly aggressive goose on Rue Lepic. But you made it. One more night in a world where the glamour was always balanced by grit, and where every whispered promise of relief came with a price tag written in cold sweat and IOUs. Tonight, let's honor the relentless, desperate, ridiculous hope that kept people chasing the next fix, the next painting, the next reason to keep going. Because for every poet who burned out before dawn, there were dozens more who found a way to wake up, face the sun, and try again, spoon or no spoon. So as you tuck yourself into your clean bed, with hot water, electric light, and absolutely no risk of finding Picasso asleep in your bathtub, maybe pause for a moment and thank the universe for the little things. Running water, honest pharmacists, sleep that isn't haunted by trumpet solos from the apartment next door. History isn't always pretty, but it's proof that people are stubborn, creative, and a little bit absurd. You made it through the night, and so did they. Sometimes by luck, sometimes by laughter, always with a little help from the city, and maybe a stranger's kindness. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift off, knowing that, for once, tomorrow doesn't have to start with cold coffee, existential dread, or a mad dash across the Seine. You've earned a peaceful sleep. Good night.